At 3 in the morning, Lena Carter stood alone in an elevator, finally allowing herself to break. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead as tears she'd been holding back for months poured down her face. She thought she was invisible, just another exhausted cleaner in an empty tower where no one saw people like her. But she was wrong. A man in an expensive suit stood in the corner, watching her fall apart with eyes that saw everything. That moment of raw vulnerability would lead her into a world of power, danger, and a love that would transform them both. If you want to know how one night changed everything, stay until the end. And if this story moves you, hit that like button and comment with your city so I can see how far Lena's journey travels. Done. The elevator doors slid open on the 42nd floor with a soft chime that echoed through the empty corridor. Lena Carter pushed her cleaning cart inside, her shoulders aching from 7 hours of scrubbing toilets, emptying trash bins, and making other people's spaces pristine. The wheels squeaked against the polished floor, a sound she'd grown so accustomed to that she barely heard it anymore. 3 a.m. 3 hours left on her shift. Then she'd take 2 buses home to her studio apartment in the part of the city where sirens sang lullabies and broken streetlights kept the shadows thick. She'd have maybe 4 hours to sleep before her day shift at the diner started at 11. The thought made her eyes burn with exhaustion. She stepped into the elevator and jabbed the button for the 38th floor with more force than necessary. The doors began to close, and she leaned against the cart, closing her eyes for just a moment. Just one moment to not be strong. To not be the woman who smiled through everything and assured everyone she was fine. The elevator lurched into motion with its familiar hum. Lena's phone buzzed in her pocket. She didn't need to look to know what it was. Another automated message from the hospital billing department. Another reminder that her mother's cancer treatment had left behind a mountain of debt that grew larger every month, no matter how many extra shifts she picked up. $32,000. The number haunted her dreams. Her mother had been gone for 8 months now, but the bills kept coming like accusations, like reminders that all of Lena's sacrifices, dropping out of college, working 3 jobs, giving up every dream she'd ever had, hadn't been enough to save her. The elevator stopped on the 40th floor. Lena straightened, wiping quickly at her eyes and composing her face into the mask she wore for the world. Professional, invisible, no trouble to anyone. The doors opened. No one got on. The corridor beyond was dark and empty, lit only by emergency exit signs that cast everything in a dim red glow. The doors closed again, and the elevator continued its descent. Lena's phone buzzed again, then again. She pulled it out with shaking hands. The first message was from her landlord. Rent is 3 days late. Need payment by Friday or we start eviction proceedings. The second was from the collection agency. Final notice before legal action. Call us immediately. The third was from her credit card company. Your account is over limit. A late fee of $35 has been assessed. Something inside her chest cracked. Not broke. It had been breaking for months now, piece by piece. This was just another fracture in a foundation that couldn't hold much longer. The elevator stopped on the 39th floor. Again, no one got on. The building was a ghost town at this hour. Just Lena and her cart and the weight of obligations she could never fulfill. The doors closed. The elevator descended. And Lena Carter, who had been holding everything together through sheer force of will, finally let go. The first sob came out as a gasp, like she'd been underwater and had just broken the surface. The second one shook her entire body. Then they came in waves, great heaving sobs that she'd been swallowing down for months because there was no time to cry, no space to be weak, no one to see her fall apart. She slid down against the wall of the elevator, her knees hitting the floor, her hands covering her face as tears poured through her fingers. The cart rolled slightly to the side, forgotten. I can't, she whispered to the empty elevator. I can't do this anymore. I can't. The words felt like a confession, like admitting defeat. She'd tried so hard to be enough, to work enough, earn enough, sacrifice enough. But it was never going to be enough. The debt would swallow her whole. The collection agencies would take everything. She'd lose her apartment, her dignity, the last shreds of the life she'd tried so desperately to hold together. I'm so tired, she said through her tears. I'm just so tired. Her voice echoed in the small space, absorbed by the metal walls that had witnessed countless private moments. How many people had stood in this elevator hiding their pain, How many had smiled through their breaking while the world remained oblivious? The elevator continued its smooth descent. 38th floor, 37th. Lena pressed her palms against the cool floor, trying to steady her breathing, trying to pull herself together before the doors opened and someone saw her like this. Broken. Defeated. Everything she'd sworn she'd never let herself become. Take your time. The voice was quiet, calm, and came from directly behind her. Lena's head snapped up, her heart slamming against her ribs. She scrambled to her feet, spinning around, her hand instinctively reaching for the pepper spray in her pocket. A man stood in the back corner of the elevator. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with dark hair touched with silver at the temples. His suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, with a crisp white shirt and a tie that probably cost more than Lena made in a week. He looked like he belonged in a boardroom or a penthouse, not in a service elevator at 3 a.m. But what struck her most were his eyes. Dark, steady, and looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite name. Not pity, not judgment, something else entirely. I didn't... Lena's voice came out rough and broken. She swiped at her face, mortified. I didn't know anyone was there. I know, he said simply. He hadn't moved from his position in the corner. His hands were relaxed at his sides, his posture calm. He stood like someone completely comfortable with silence, with witnessing another person's pain without rushing to fill the space with empty platitudes. Lena's cheeks burned with humiliation. How long have you been standing there? Since the 42nd floor. The entire time. He'd been there the entire time, watching her fall apart, listening to her sob like a child. Fresh tears threatened to spill over, but now they were tears of shame. I'm sorry, she managed. I'll get out at the next floor. You don't have to apologize, the man said. His voice was low and even, with a quality that made her want to believe him. And you don't have to leave. The elevator passed the 36th floor, continuing down. Lena stood frozen, unsure what to do with herself. She was acutely aware of how she must look. Red eyes, tear-stained face, her cheap work uniform wrinkled and stained with cleaning chemicals. Standing in front of a man who looked like he owned half the city. She started, but her voice cracked. Sit down, he said gently. Not a command, but an invitation. You look like you're about to fall over. She wanted to refuse, wanted to gather the shreds of her dignity and walk out with her head high. But her legs were shaking, and she was so tired of pretending to be strong when she felt like she was made of fractures and fault lines. Slowly, she sank back down to the floor, her back against the wall. The man didn't move from his corner. He simply stood there, a quiet presence in her moment of collapse. The elevator continued its descent in silence. 35th floor, 34th. Bad night? He asked after a moment. A laugh escaped her throat, sharp and bitter. Bad year. He nodded, as if this made perfect sense. Want to talk about it? Why would you want to listen? Maybe because no one else has. The simple truth of that statement hit her like a physical blow. He was right. There was no one in her life who asked how she really was. Her coworkers were friendly but distant. Her few remaining friends had drifted away when she'd stopped having time or money for anything beyond survival. Even when her mother was alive, Lena had been the one doing the comforting, the reassuring, the staying strong. I don't even know you, she said quietly. Sometimes that makes it easier. He paused. I'm Victor. Lena. Hello, Lena. He said her name like it mattered, like she mattered. The elevator reached the 30th floor and kept descending. Neither of them had pressed a button to stop it. I'm drowning, Lena heard herself say. The words came out before she could stop them, pulled from somewhere deep and desperate. I work 3 jobs, and it's not enough. It's never enough. My mom died 8 months ago, and the bills from her treatment are going to destroy me. I'm about to lose my apartment. Collection agencies call me 15 times a day. And I'm just so tired of trying to hold everything together when it all keeps falling apart anyway. She didn't know why she was telling him this. Maybe because he was a stranger she'd never see again. Maybe because it was 3 a.m. and the normal rules of the world didn't seem to apply. Maybe because he'd asked and no one ever asked. Victor was quiet for a moment, processing her words. Then he asked, "How much?" "What?" "The debt. How much?" Lena's throat tightened. $32,000, medical bills mostly, plus rent I'm behind on, credit cards I maxed out trying to keep up with everything else. She gave another broken laugh. Might as well be $32 million. I'll never be able to pay it. That's not true, Victor said calmly. You don't understand. I understand more than you think. He shifted slightly, and for the first time she saw something in his expression that looked almost like recognition, like he knew exactly what it felt like to carry impossible weight. I understand what it's like to feel like you're buried so deep that light can't reach you anymore. The elevator passed the 20th floor. What do you do? Lena asked, looking at his expensive suit, his polished shoes, his air of absolute confidence. For work, I mean. I solve problems, Victor said. It was both an answer and not an answer at all. What kind of problems? The kind most people can't solve on their own. He tilted his head slightly, studying her. What did you do before this? Before the cleaning jobs? I was in college, pre-law. The words felt like they belonged to someone else's life. I was going to be a lawyer, help people who couldn't afford good representation. She gestured to her uniform, her cart. Obviously that didn't work out. Why not? Because my mom got sick, and medical bills don't care about your dreams. Lena's voice hardened with the old anger, the old grief. I dropped out to take care of her, worked every shift I could find. And when she died anyway, the bills kept coming. So here I am, cleaning toilets in buildings where people like me are supposed to be invisible. You're not invisible to me, Victor said quietly. Something in his tone made her look up, really look at him. In the elevator's harsh fluorescent light, she could see the sharp planes of his face, the intensity in his dark eyes, the way he stood like someone who'd learned to command rooms just by entering them. But there was also something else, a carefully controlled power, like a blade kept sheathed until needed. Who are you really? She asked. A slight smile touched his lips. Someone who notices things other people miss. The elevator reached the ground floor and stopped with a gentle bump. The doors didn't open. Victor reached over and pressed the emergency stop button. The alarm didn't sound. He must have disabled it somehow. The elevator was suspended now, caught between floors and moments, existing outside of normal time. Why did you do that? Lena asked, though she didn't move to leave. Because I want to help you, Victor said simply. And I think you need more than a 2-minute elevator ride to hear what I have to say. You don't even know me. I know you work 3 jobs and still find the energy to cry about drowning instead of just giving up. I know you sacrificed your education and your future to take care of your mother. I know you're smart enough to get into pre-law and strong enough to survive everything that's tried to break you. His eyes held hers. That's enough. Lena's heart was beating too fast. Why would you want to help me? Strangers don't just help each other, not without wanting something. You're right, Victor acknowledged. Most people don't. But I'm not most people. Then what do you want? He considered this for a moment. I want to see what happens when someone with your intelligence and resilience isn't spending every ounce of energy just trying to survive. I want to see what you could become if the weight was lifted. That sounds like a line. It's not. His voice was utterly sincere. I'm offering you a job, Lena. A real one. As my personal assistant. The salary would be enough to cover your debts and your living expenses. You'd work normal hours. You'd use your mind instead of destroying your body. Lena stared at him, certain she'd misheard. You're offering me a job? Right now? In an elevator at 3 a.m? Yes. You don't know anything about me. My resume, my references. I know you're intelligent. I know you're resilient. I know you understand what it means to fight for something. Victor's expression was completely serious. That's more valuable than any resume. This is insane, Lena whispered. But even as she said it, something in her chest, something that had been crushed under debt and exhaustion and hopelessness, began to unfurl like a flower turning toward unexpected light. Probably, Victor agreed, but I didn't get where I am by following conventional wisdom. And where exactly are you? He smiled slightly. Somewhere I built myself. Somewhere I have the resources to help people who deserve it. He paused. The question is, are you brave enough to say yes? Lena's mind raced. This was crazy. She'd just met this man. He could be anyone, a predator, a manipulator, someone with ulterior motives she couldn't begin to guess. Every ounce of caution told her to refuse, to get out of this elevator, to go back to her hard but predictable life. But that life was killing her, slowly, inevitably, grinding her down until there'd be nothing left. What would I have to do? She asked carefully. As your assistant. Manage my schedule. Handle correspondence. Attend meetings with me. Think strategically about problems and offer solutions. Victor's voice was steady, professional. Nothing you're not capable of. In fact, I suspect you'll exceed my expectations considerably. And the salary? $90,000 a year to start, with performance bonuses. Lena's breath caught. That was more money than she'd made in the last 3 years combined. That's too much for an assistant position. It's what you're worth. Victor said it like a fact, like something beyond dispute. I pay people what they're worth, Lena, not what the market thinks it can get away with offering. She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe that this was real, that someone was offering her a way out of the drowning darkness. But nothing in her life had ever been this easy. What's the catch? She asked. There has to be a catch. Victor's expression shifted slightly, becoming more serious. The catch is that my world isn't simple. The people I work with, the situations I navigate, they require discretion, intelligence, and trust. You'd need to be someone I could rely on completely. That sounds ominous. It sounds honest. He held her gaze. I won't lie to you, Lena. Working for me would expose you to things you haven't encountered before. But I'd also protect you, pay you fairly, and give you opportunities to build a real future. The elevator hummed quietly around them, suspended in its mechanical pause. Lena felt like she was standing at a crossroads she hadn't known existed. One path led back to her 3 jobs, her crushing debt, her slow collapse into nothing. The other path led into unknown territory with a man who seemed too good to be true. But maybe that was the point. Maybe sometimes the universe offered you something impossible, and you had to be brave enough to reach for it. If I say yes, she said slowly, when would I start? Monday. I'll have contracts drawn up. You'll spend the first week getting oriented, learning the systems. Victor paused. And I'll take care of your immediate debts. Consider it a signing bonus. Lena's eyes widened. You can't just, that's $32,000. I'm aware of the amount. His tone was matter of fact. I have the resources, and you have the need. It's a simple transaction. Nothing about this is simple. No, Victor agreed. But it could be the start of something better than simple. It could be the start of something extraordinary. The word hung in the air between them. Extraordinary. When was the last time Lena's life had been anything but exhausting, desperate, barely managed? The idea of extraordinary seemed like a fantasy from someone else's world. But Victor was looking at her like she already belonged in that world. Like the woman crying on an elevator floor and the woman he was offering this opportunity to were the same person, equally worthy of both moments. I need to think about it, Lena said, even though every cell in her body was screaming at her to say yes immediately, to grab this lifeline before it disappeared. Of course. Victor reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. It was heavy stock, embossed with elegant lettering. Victor Hale, Private Consulting. Below was a phone number and an address in the most expensive part of the city. Call me by Friday. If you want the job, we'll set up a meeting to go over details. If you don't, I'll understand, and this conversation never happened. Lena took the card, her fingers trembling slightly. Why me? Really, you could hire anyone, someone with experience, credentials, because I've met 1,000 people with experience and credentials who've never had to fight for anything real, Victor said. You have something they'll never have. You understand what it means to survive. That's worth more than any degree. He pressed the button to release the emergency stop. The elevator began to descend again, moving smoothly toward the ground floor. And Lena, Victor added, his voice softer. The fact that you're questioning this, that you're being careful, that's exactly why you're the right choice. Someone who thinks critically and doesn't just accept things at face value. That's who I need working with me. The elevator doors opened onto the lobby. It was empty except for a security guard dozing at the front desk. The marble floors gleamed under the dim night lighting, reflecting the city lights from the windows. Victor stepped out first, then turned back to face her. In the lobby's better lighting, she could see him more clearly. He was probably in his early 40s, with the kind of presence that came from years of commanding authority. But there was also something in his eyes, an understanding of darkness, of struggle, of what it cost to climb out of deep places. "Thank you," Lena said, though the words felt inadequate for what had just happened. "For listening, for the offer, for—" She gestured helplessly at the card in her hand. "Thursday," Victor said. "Call me by Thursday if you're interested. That gives you time to think clearly, outside of an emotional moment." He was right. She needed to think about this when she wasn't breaking down, when she could see all the angles and possibilities. But even now, standing in the empty lobby with her cleaning cart and her tear-stained face, she knew what her answer would be. Sometimes you had to take the leap, even when you couldn't see the bottom. "Thursday," she agreed. Victor nodded once, a small smile touching his lips. Then he walked toward the lobby doors, his steps confident and sure. A black car was waiting outside, sleek and expensive. A driver got out and opened the back door. Victor slid inside without looking back, and the car pulled away into the early morning darkness. Lena stood alone in the lobby, staring at the business card in her hand. The embossed letters caught the light, making Victor's name seem to shimmer. She turned it over. On the back, in precise handwriting, he'd written, "You're not invisible. You never were." Her eyes filled with fresh tears, but these were different from the ones she'd cried in the elevator. These tears felt like release, like recognition, like the first deep breath after being underwater too long. The security guard stirred at his desk, noticed her, and waved sleepily. Lena waved back, then pushed her cart toward the service entrance. She still had 3 hours left on her shift. 3 more hours of cleaning and scrubbing and making herself invisible to the people who worked in these towers during daylight hours. But now, every movement felt different. The weight was still there, the debt, the exhaustion, the endless struggle. But for the first time in months, she could see a path that led somewhere other than deeper into darkness. She thought about Victor's question, "Are you brave enough to say yes?" As she pushed her cart into the service elevator, Lena smiled. It was a small smile, tentative and uncertain, but it was real. Yes, she thought, yes, I am. The elevator doors closed, carrying her upward to continue her night's work. But in her pocket, the business card felt like a key to a door she hadn't known existed. A door that led to extraordinary possibilities, to a life where she wasn't just surviving, but actually living. She didn't know yet what Victor Hale's world truly looked like. She didn't know what shadows lurked behind his polished exterior or what price would come with accepting his help. But she knew she was tired of drowning, tired of being invisible, tired of watching her dreams die under the weight of circumstances she couldn't control. If this was her chance to breathe again, she was going to take it. The city stretched out beyond the tower windows, vast and glittering and full of secrets. Somewhere out there, Victor Hale was moving through that world with purpose and power. And in just a few days, if she was brave enough, Lena Carter would step into that world too. She pulled out her phone and looked at the messages that had broken her earlier. The bills, the threats, the reminders of everything she couldn't pay. They didn't look as terrifying now. They looked like problems that could be solved, obstacles that could be overcome. On Thursday, she would call. On Monday, if everything Victor had said was true, she would start a new life. But for now, she had 3 more hours of work. 3 more hours of being invisible to everyone except the one person who'd seen her at her lowest and offered her a hand up instead of pity. Lena pushed her cart down the corridor, the wheels squeaking their familiar rhythm. But with every step, she felt lighter, like she was already shedding the weight of the life that had been crushing her. She didn't know what came next, but for the first time in a long time, she was ready to find out. Thursday came faster than Lena expected, and slower than she could stand. She'd spent the 3 days between that elevator encounter and the deadline Victor had given her in a state of constant second-guessing. Every time she reached for her phone to make the call, doubt crept in like fog. What if it was all some elaborate scam? What if Victor Hale was dangerous? What if she was trading one kind of trap for another? But then she'd look at the bills piled on her kitchen counter, at the eviction notice taped to her door, at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, exhausted eyes, hollow cheeks, the face of someone being ground down to nothing. And she'd remember the way Victor had looked at her, not with pity, not with judgment, with recognition. On Thursday morning, she called the number on the card. He answered on the second ring. "Lena, I was hoping I'd hear from you." His voice was exactly as she remembered, calm, assured, with that quality of absolute attention, like she was the only thing in his world at that moment. "I want the job," she said, surprised by how steady her own voice sounded. "If the offer is still open." "It is. Can you meet me today? 2:00. The address is on the card. I have my shift at the diner until 3. Call in sick," Victor said simply. "This is more important." Lena hesitated. She'd never called in sick unless she was literally unable to stand. Missing a shift meant losing money she desperately needed, even if that need was about to end. "Lena," Victor's voice softened slightly, "trust me. After today, you won't need to worry about the diner shift anymore." She closed her eyes and made the leap. "Okay, 2:00. Good. I'll see you then." He hung up without ceremony. Lena stood in her cramped apartment, staring at her phone, feeling like she'd just stepped off a cliff. The exhilaration and terror were equally overwhelming. She called the diner and told them she had the flu. Her manager was annoyed but unsurprised. Lena had been one of their most reliable workers, so one sick day wouldn't get her fired. Then she looked at her closet, trying to figure out what someone wore to meet a man like Victor Hale in an office building in the wealthiest part of the city. Everything she owned was either a uniform or worn-out casual clothes. Nothing remotely professional, nothing that didn't scream, "I'm poor and struggling." Finally, she settled on a simple black dress she'd bought for her mother's funeral and hadn't worn since. She paired it with her only decent shoes and pulled her dark hair back into a neat bun. When she looked in the mirror, she saw someone trying very hard to look like they belonged in a world they'd never been part of. It would have to do. The address on Victor's card led to a sleek glass tower in the financial district. Lena stood outside for a full minute, watching well-dressed professionals flow in and out through the revolving doors. They all moved with purpose and confidence, like they'd never questioned their right to occupy space in places like this. She took a deep breath and walked inside. The lobby was all marble and chrome, with soaring ceilings and abstract art that probably cost more than Lena's entire life. A security desk sat in the center, manned by 2 guards who looked like they could handle significantly more than checking IDs. "I'm here to see Victor Hale," Lena said, approaching the desk. 2:00 appointment." One of the guards checked his computer, then nodded. "Penthouse level. Ms. Chen will meet you at the elevator." He handed her a visitor badge and gestured toward a bank of elevators separate from the main ones. These were clearly for VIPs only, polished to a mirror shine with digital displays and soft lighting. Lena's heart hammered as she stepped inside. The elevator rose so smoothly she barely felt the movement, but she watched the floor numbers climb, 20, 30, 40, 50. Finally, it stopped at 62. The penthouse. The doors opened onto a private lobby that looked like something from an architecture magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city. Modern furniture in neutral tones suggested understated wealth. And standing in the center of it all was an elegant woman in her 50s, her silver hair cut in a precise bob, wearing a tailored navy suit. "Ms. Carter," the woman said with a warm smile. "I'm Margaret Chen, Mr. Hale's executive assistant. Welcome." "Thank you," Lena managed, stepping out of the elevator on legs that felt unsteady. Margaret's eyes were kind but assessing, taking in Lena's borrowed-from-tragedy outfit with the practiced gaze of someone who'd seen it all. "Mr. Hale is finishing a call, but he'll be with you shortly. Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee?" "Water would be great, thank you." Margaret led her to a seating area and returned moments later with a glass of water in crystal that probably cost more than Lena's monthly rent. "Mr. Hale speaks very highly of you," she said, settling into the chair across from Lena. "That's unusual. He's not often impressed on first meeting." Lena took a sip of water, unsure how to respond. "We met under unusual circumstances." "So I understand." Margaret's smile suggested she knew more than she was saying. "I've worked with Victor for 15 years. He has excellent instincts about people. If he believes you belong here, you do. I don't have any experience as an executive assistant, Lena admitted. I don't even know what the job actually entails beyond what you see in movies. You'll learn, Margaret said with quiet confidence. And between you and me, the technical skills are the easy part. What matters is judgment, discretion, and the ability to think 3 steps ahead. Victor believes you have those qualities. I trust his judgment. Before Lena could respond, a door opened across the lobby. Victor Hale emerged, and Lena's breath caught slightly. In the elevator's harsh fluorescent lighting, he'd been imposing. Here, in his own environment, he was commanding. He wore another perfectly tailored suit, navy this time, and moved with the easy authority of someone who'd built an empire. But when his eyes found hers, they held the same quality she remembered. That absolute attention, that recognition. Lena, he said, crossing to her. Thank you for coming. She stood, suddenly very aware of her second-hand dress and scuffed shoes. Thank you for the opportunity. Let's talk in my office. He glanced at Margaret. Hold my calls for the next hour. Of course. Victor's office was exactly what Lena expected, and somehow more. One wall was entirely glass, offering a view of the city that made her feel like she was standing on top of the world. The furniture was minimalist, but clearly expensive. Bookshelves lined another wall, filled with volumes on business, philosophy, and strategy. But what caught her attention was the desk. It was clean. Just a laptop, a single notepad, and a fountain pen. No clutter. No chaos. The workspace of someone who controlled their environment completely. Victor gestured to a leather chair facing the desk. Lena sat, and he settled into his own chair, studying her with those dark, intelligent eyes. You look terrified, he observed. I am, Lena admitted. This is completely outside anything I've ever experienced. Good. If you weren't nervous, I'd worry about your judgment. He opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. I had my attorney draw up a contract, standard employment terms, confidentiality agreements, benefits package. Take your time reading it. He slid the folder across the desk. Lena opened it with trembling fingers and began reading. The contract was surprisingly straightforward. $90,000 annual salary, health insurance, retirement contributions, 2 weeks paid vacation. The duties listed were exactly what Victor had described: managing his schedule, handling correspondence, attending meetings, providing strategic input. But there was also a confidentiality clause that went beyond the standard corporate language. It explicitly stated that Lena would be exposed to sensitive business information and was required to maintain absolute discretion about Victor's affairs, both professional and personal. This confidentiality section, Lena said slowly, it's very specific. Yes. Victor leaned back in his chair. I told you my world isn't simple. The work I do requires trust. I need to know that what you see and hear stays between us. What exactly is it that you do? Lena asked, setting the contract down. Your card says private consulting, but that could mean anything. Victor was quiet for a moment, and Lena could see him weighing his words carefully. I solve problems for people who can't solve them through conventional means. Sometimes that's legitimate business consulting. Sometimes it's more complicated. How complicated? Complicated enough that I need someone I can trust absolutely. His gaze was steady. I'm not going to lie to you, Lena. Some of my business exists in gray areas, but I'm also not asking you to do anything illegal or harmful. What I need is someone intelligent enough to navigate complex situations and discreet enough to keep confidences. Lena's heart was racing. This was it. The catch she'd known had to exist. Victor Hale wasn't just a businessman. He was something else, something that operated in those gray areas he'd mentioned. She should stand up and leave. Thank him for his time and walk away from whatever this was. But she didn't. What kind of gray areas? She asked instead. Victor smiled slightly, like he'd expected exactly this response. The kind where the law isn't always equipped to handle real-world problems. The kind where people need help but can't get it through official channels. He paused. I'm not a criminal, Lena, but I'm also not bound by the same limitations as people who work entirely within the system. That's a very careful answer. It's an honest one. He leaned forward, his expression serious. I'm offering you a choice with full information. You can take this job, knowing that you'll be exposed to situations that might make you uncomfortable. Or you can walk away right now, and I'll still pay off your debts. No strings attached. No obligations. Lena stared at him. You'd pay my debts even if I don't take the job? Yes. Why? Because you deserve help, whether or not you work for me. Victor's voice was matter of fact. What happened to you? The debt, the impossible situation. That wasn't fair. I have the means to fix it, so I will. That doesn't make sense. People don't just give away $32,000. I'm not people, Victor said simply. And it's not about the money. It's about seeing someone with potential being crushed by circumstances beyond their control. I can remove those circumstances. So I will. Lena felt tears pricking her eyes again. You don't even know me. I know enough. He stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city. When I was 23, I was drowning in debt from my father's gambling addiction. Collection agencies calling constantly. Threats. Fear. I worked 3 jobs and still couldn't stay afloat. He turned back to face her. Someone gave me a chance, not because I deserved it, but because he saw potential I didn't know I had. That chance changed my life. Now I'm in a position to do the same for others. What happened to the person who helped you? He died 5 years ago. But before he did, he told me the best way to honor what he'd given me was to pass it forward. Victor's expression softened. So that's what I'm doing. The question is whether you're brave enough to accept it. Lena looked down at the contract in her hands. Every logical, cautious part of her brain was screaming warnings. This was too good to be true. Victor Hale was too generous, too interested in helping her. The gray areas he mentioned could mean anything, but she was so tired of drowning, so tired of watching her life slip away while she struggled just to survive. And something in Victor's eyes, that recognition, that understanding, told her he meant what he said. If I say yes, she said slowly, what happens next? You sign the contract. I wire the money to pay off your debts. You start Monday morning, and Margaret spends the week training you. Victor returned to his desk. You work hard, you learn fast, and you become indispensable, which I suspect will happen quite quickly. And the gray areas you mentioned? You'll see them gradually. I won't throw you into deep water before you know how to swim. He sat down, his expression serious. But I will be honest with you, always. If you ask me a direct question, I'll give you a direct answer. That's the foundation of trust. Lena took a deep breath. Okay, direct question. Are you involved in anything that would put me in physical danger? No, I protect the people who work for me. You'll be as safe working for me as you would be anywhere else. Safer, actually. Direct question. Is any of your money from drugs, human trafficking, or anything that exploits vulnerable people? No. Victor's voice was firm. I have lines I don't cross. Those are among them. Direct question. Why do you really want me to work for you? And don't tell me it's just because you saw potential. There has to be more to it. Victor smiled, but it was a complicated smile. You want the truth? Yes. I'm tired of being surrounded by people who tell me what I want to hear. People who've never struggled, who don't understand what it means to fight for survival. He held her gaze. You've been invisible your whole life. That means you see things other people miss. You understand dynamics that privileged people can't comprehend. That perspective is valuable, more valuable than you realize. So I'm useful to you. Yes, and I'm useful to you. That's called a mutually beneficial relationship. Victor leaned back. I'm not pretending this is altruism, Lena. I'm offering you this job because I think you'll be excellent at it, and because having you on my team makes me stronger. But that doesn't diminish the fact that it's also going to change your life. The honesty was almost jarring. No platitudes, no soft selling, just clear-eyed acknowledgement of what this arrangement actually was. Lena picked up the pen on the desk. It was heavy, expensive, the kind of pen people use to sign important documents. Her hand hovered over the signature line. If I sign this and it turns out you're not who you say you are, she said quietly, I'll have nothing left to lose. You understand that? I do. Victor's expression was solemn. And if it helps, I'll give you my word that I won't betray your trust. I know that doesn't mean much from a stranger, but it's all I can offer right now. Time will prove whether I'm worthy of it. Lena looked at the contract one more time. Then she signed her name in careful letters, Lena Marie Carter. Victor took the contract and countersigned it with a satisfied nod. Welcome to the team. He pulled out his phone and typed something quickly. I'm sending the payment instructions to my bank now. Your debts will be cleared by end of business today. Lena's hands began to shake. Just like that? Just like that. He set his phone down. Margaret will give you onboarding paperwork and schedule your first week. You'll need business attire. I'll have an account set up at a few stores downtown. Consider it part of your signing package. I can't accept. You can, and you will, Victor said firmly, but not unkindly. You're representing my office now. That requires a certain standard of dress. It's not charity. It's a job requirement. Lena laughed, a slightly hysterical sound that bubbled up from the sheer unreality of the moment. This morning I was worried about making rent. Now you're sending me shopping for business clothes. Life changes quickly sometimes. Victor stood and extended his hand across the desk. The question is whether you're ready for it. Lena stood and shook his hand. His grip was firm, his palm warm. I guess I'm about to find out. I guess you are. Margaret spent the next hour walking Lena through the onboarding process. There were forms to fill out, systems to learn, protocols to understand. Lena's head spun with information about security badges, email access, phone systems, and the dozens of small details that made up working in a place like this. Don't worry about remembering everything right now, Margaret said kindly, noticing Lena's overwhelmed expression. The first week is always drinking from a fire hose, but you'll adapt. Everyone does. How did you start working for Victor? Lena asked as Margaret showed her the filing system. I was a secretary at a law firm he consulted with. He offered me 3 times my salary to come work for him. Margaret smiled at the memory. I thought he was crazy. But 15 years later, it's been the best decision I ever made. What's he like to work for? Margaret considered this carefully. Demanding. He expects excellence and doesn't tolerate laziness or incompetence. But he's also fair, loyal, and genuinely cares about the people in his employ. She paused. There are things about Victor's business that took me time to understand, but I've never once questioned his integrity or his intentions. That's a careful answer, Lena observed, echoing what she'd said to Victor earlier. It's an honest one, Margaret replied with a knowing smile. You'll understand more as you go, but I'll tell you this. Victor Hale is one of the best men I've ever known. Complex, yes. Operating outside traditional boundaries, absolutely, but fundamentally good. Before Lena could respond, Victor emerged from his office with his phone to his ear. He was speaking in low, clipped tones that suggested the call was serious. I don't care what Mitchell thinks. The timeline doesn't change. No, absolutely not. That's non-negotiable. Fine. Set up the meeting for tomorrow night, the usual place. He hung up and noticed Lena watching him. Sorry, small crisis. Everything okay? Lena asked. It will be. He glanced at his watch. Margaret, can you finish up here? I have a meeting across town in 30 minutes. Of course. Victor looked at Lena. Go shopping this afternoon. Get at least 5 business outfits, shoes, whatever you need. The account information is in your onboarding packet. And Lena? Yes? Breathe. This is the beginning of something good. Trust that. Then he was gone, moving with that same purposeful stride, his presence somehow filling the space even after he'd left. Lena turned to Margaret. Does he always move that fast? Always. Margaret pulled out a sleek black credit card and handed it to Lena. This is for the shopping. No limit. Get what you need to feel confident and professional. Lena stared at the card like it might bite her. This feels surreal. I know, but you'll get used to it. Margaret's expression turned serious. Lena, I'm going to give you the same advice I wish someone had given me when I started. Victor is going to challenge you. He's going to push you beyond what you think you're capable of. Don't shy away from that. Rise to it. You'll surprise yourself. What if I fail? Then you'll learn from it and do better next time. Victor doesn't expect perfection. He expects effort and growth. Margaret began gathering the paperwork. Now go. Enjoy the shopping. Monday morning, 7:30 sharp, your real life begins. Lena left the building in a daze, the credit card burning a hole in her purse. She walked 3 blocks before stopping on a corner, looking up at the sky, and letting out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for years. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Debts paid in full. Confirmation emails should be in your inbox. VH Lena opened her email with shaking hands. There they were, payment confirmations from the hospital, the collection agency, her landlord, her credit card company. Every single debt that had been crushing her, gone, erased, like they'd never existed. She stood on the busy street while people flowed around her, tears streaming down her face for the 3rd time in a week. But these weren't tears of despair. These were tears of release, of disbelief, of something that felt dangerously close to hope. A woman passing by gave her a concerned look. "Are you okay, honey?" Lena laughed through her tears. "Yes, I think I actually am." She wiped her face and pulled up the list of stores Margaret had recommended. Time to buy clothes for a life she still couldn't quite believe was hers. As she walked toward the shopping district, Lena thought about the elevator ride that had changed everything, about breaking down in front of a stranger who'd seen her not as a problem or a charity case, but as someone with unrealized potential, about Victor Hale's gray areas and his talk of operating outside traditional boundaries. She didn't know what she was walking into, didn't know what those gray areas would reveal, or what price might come with this new life. But for the first time since her mother got sick, Lena felt like she was moving towards something instead of just struggling to keep her head above water. Monday would bring answers. Monday would begin her real education in Victor Hale's world. But today, she was going to buy clothes that made her feel like she belonged in that world. Today, she was going to take her first steps into a future that looked nothing like the past she was leaving behind. The sun broke through the clouds as she walked, casting long shadows on the sidewalk. Lena lifted her face to the warmth and smiled. She was ready. Monday morning arrived with the kind of clarity that only came after a sleepless night. Lena stood in front of her bathroom mirror at 6 a.m. wearing one of her new suits, a charcoal gray with clean lines that made her look like someone who belonged in Victor's world. The transformation was startling. She barely recognized the professional woman staring back at her. The weekend had been a blur of shopping, packing up her miserable studio apartment, and trying to process the seismic shift her life had taken. She'd found a new place, nothing extravagant, but clean and safe, in a neighborhood where she didn't hear gunshots at night. The first month's rent and deposit had barely made a dent in her new salary, a reality that still felt impossible. Her phone buzzed, a text from Margaret. "Coffee's ready when you arrive. Don't be nervous, you've got this." Lena smiled despite the butterflies rioting in her stomach. She grabbed her new leather bag, another purchase that had made her wince until she remembered the credit card had no limit, and headed out into the early morning darkness. The city looked different now, same streets, same buildings, but Lena was seeing them through different eyes. She wasn't invisible anymore. She was walking toward something instead of just surviving another day. The office building's lobby was quieter at 7:30 than it had been during her interview. A few early arrivals moved through with purpose, and the security guards greeted her by name now. Lena Carter, executive assistant to Victor Hale. The title still felt like it belonged to someone else. Margaret was waiting when the elevator opened on the 62nd floor, holding a to-go cup from an expensive coffee shop. "Vanilla latte, right? I took a guess based on your profile." "That's perfect, thank you." Lena accepted the cup, wondering what else Margaret had deduced about her. "Victor's already in. He's always here by 6. Margaret led her through the office, which looked different in the morning light. "First week is observation. You'll shadow me, learn the systems, understand how Victor operates. Questions?" "About 1,000, Lena admitted. "Good, ask them all." Margaret settled behind her desk and gestured to a second workspace beside it. "That's yours. Computer set up, email active, phone forwarded. Let's start with the calendar." The next 3 hours were an intensive crash course in managing Victor Hale's life. Lena learned that he kept 3 separate calendars: public appointments, private meetings, and something Margaret called special consultations that were never written down but existed in a complex verbal code. She learned that Victor preferred direct communication, hated small talk in professional settings, and had specific rituals around how he took his coffee and when he preferred to handle certain types of business. "Tuesday and Thursday evenings are always blocked," Margaret explained, pulling up the calendar. "Those are for the consultations I mentioned. You won't attend those initially, but eventually you'll need to understand how they work. What kind of consultations? Lena asked carefully. Margaret's expression shifted slightly, becoming more guarded. The kind that require discretion. People come to Victor when they have problems the normal channels can't solve. Legal issues, business disputes, personal situations that need delicate handling. Like what? Before Margaret could answer, Victor's door opened. He emerged looking as sharp as ever in a navy suit, his attention already on his phone. Margaret, did Chen confirm for this afternoon? Yes. 3 o'clock, your office. Good. His eyes shifted to Lena and he smiled slightly. First day. How are you holding up? Drinking from a fire hose like Margaret warned, Lena said. Better to immerse yourself than wade in slowly. He checked his watch. I have a breakfast meeting downtown. Should be back by 11. Lena, sit in on my noon meeting. Start getting a feel for how I work. It wasn't a question. Victor moved through the world issuing clear directives, and people responded. Lena was beginning to understand why. Of course, she said. He nodded and strode toward the elevator, already making another call before the doors closed. The man existed in a state of constant motion and decision-making that was almost hypnotic to watch. He never stops, does he? Lena asked. Not really. Margaret pulled up another screen. But he's also incredibly focused. When he's with you, you have his complete attention. That's rarer than you'd think in men like him. The morning passed quickly. Lena absorbed information like a sponge, taking notes on everything from Victor's preferred document formats to the names of key contacts in what Margaret called sensitive relationships. By 11, when Victor returned, Lena's head was spinning, but she felt like she was beginning to understand the ecosystem she'd entered. Victor's noon meeting was with a nervous man in his 50s named Robert Garrett, who owned a chain of construction companies. Lena sat in the corner of Victor's office, ostensibly taking notes, but mostly observing. Mr. Hale, I appreciate you seeing me, Garrett said, settling into the chair across from Victor's desk. His hands were shaking slightly. I didn't know where else to turn. Tell me about the problem, Victor said, his voice calm and professional. It's the Riverside Development Project. We won the contract fair and square, but now the city council is threatening to revoke it. They're claiming permit violations that don't exist. Garrett's voice cracked with frustration. I think Councilor Morrison is behind it. His brother-in-law bid on the same project and lost. And you've tried going through proper channels? Everything. Appeals, lawyers, even met with Morrison directly. He just smiles and tells me the process has to run its course. Garrett leaned forward desperately. This project is worth $8 million to my company. If we lose it, I'll have to lay off 200 workers, good people with families. Victor was quiet for a moment, his fingers steepled in front of his face. Lena watched him think, seeing the calculations happening behind those dark eyes. Councilor Morrison has vulnerabilities, Victor said finally. Everyone does. The question is whether you're comfortable with me exploiting them. Garrett swallowed hard. What would that entail? I'd have a conversation with him. Remind him that his position on the council depends on public trust. Suggest that certain financial irregularities in his campaign funding might be of interest to investigative journalists. Victor's tone was matter-of-fact. He'll back off. You'll get your project, and those 200 workers keep their jobs. That sounds like blackmail, Garrett said, though his voice held more hope than condemnation. That sounds like leveraging available information to correct an injustice, Victor corrected. Morrison is abusing his power for personal gain. I'm simply evening the playing field. And what do you want in return? 10% of the project's profit, paid discreetly through a consulting fee. Garrett did the math visibly. $800,000. But set against losing the entire project and destroying his company, it was a bargain. Done. Victor stood and extended his hand. I'll have this resolved by the end of the week. Margaret will send you the consulting contract. After Garrett left, looking like a man who'd just been granted a reprieve from execution, Victor turned to Lena. Thoughts? She'd been prepared for this. He wanted her honest reaction, not professional diplomacy. You just helped a man keep his business and save 200 jobs by threatening to expose a corrupt politician. That's an accurate summary. Does it bother you? Lena considered this carefully. The methods are questionable, but the outcome seems just. Welcome to the gray areas, Victor said with a slight smile. Morrison is using his position to punish a competitor out of spite and greed. Robert Garrett did everything right and was being destroyed anyway. The system failed. So I correct the failure by operating outside the system. The system is a tool. When it works, I use it. When it fails people who deserve better, I find other tools. He sat on the edge of his desk, studying her. Does this change your opinion of the job? I don't know yet, Lena answered honestly. I need to see more to understand the full picture. Fair enough. He seemed pleased with her answer. You'll see more. Quite a bit more. The afternoon brought 2 more meetings, each revealing another facet of Victor's world. A woman whose ex-husband was using legal technicalities to avoid paying child support. A small business owner being muscled out by a larger competitor through intimidation tactics. Each case existed in those gray areas Victor had mentioned. Situations where the law couldn't or wouldn't help, but where Victor could apply pressure in ways that corrected injustices. By 6 o'clock, Lena's understanding of her new employer had shifted considerably. Victor Hale wasn't a traditional businessman. He was something more complex, part consultant, part fixer, part vigilante operating in the spaces between legal and illegal. First day conclusions? Why, Margaret asked as they prepared to leave. He's not what I expected, Lena said carefully. No one ever is. Margaret smiled knowingly. But you're still here, which means you see what I see. That the world isn't black and white, and sometimes good people need someone willing to work in the gray. Lena walked home through the cooling evening, her mind churning. She'd signed on for this with eyes open, knowing Victor operated outside conventional boundaries. But seeing it in action was different from abstract understanding. He wielded power with precision, helping people the system had failed while profiting from their desperation. Was that noble or predatory, just or exploitative? She genuinely didn't know. Her phone rang as she reached her new apartment. Victor's name on the screen. Hello? How are you processing today? He asked without preamble. Still figuring that out, Lena admitted, unlocking her door. Good. I'd be concerned if you weren't questioning what you saw. He paused. Can you meet me for dinner? There's something I want to show you. Lena's pulse quickened. When? Now. I'll send a car. 20 minutes later, a sleek black sedan picked her up and drove her to a restaurant she'd only read about in lifestyle magazines. The kind of place where reservations required weeks of advance notice and entrees cost more than she used to make in a day. The hostess led her to a private room in the back where Victor waited, 2 glasses of wine already poured. Sit, he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. We need to talk about what you're really working for. Lena sat, her heart racing. Okay. Victor took a sip of his wine, organizing his thoughts. What you saw today is the surface level. Small cases, straightforward solutions. People come to me because they need help and have nowhere else to turn. I provide that help in exchange for payment. It's a business. But it's not just a business, Lena said. No. He set down his glass. It's also a way of maintaining balance in a fundamentally unjust system. The wealthy and powerful can always hire lawyers and lobbyists and buy their way out of problems. The rest of the world gets crushed by those same problems. I level that playing field. For a fee. Yes, because I'm not a charity. His eyes were steady on hers. I help people who deserve help and can afford to pay. That compensation allows me to build power, which allows me to help more people. It's a sustainable model. A waiter brought their first course, something delicate and beautifully plated that Lena barely registered. Her attention was entirely on Victor. What about the people who can't afford to pay? She asked. Victor smiled slightly. You think I haven't considered them? Lena, about 30% of my consultations are pro bono. People who desperately need help but have nothing to offer in return. I take those cases because they're worth taking. You didn't mention that this morning. I wanted you to form your own conclusions first, to see the business side and decide whether it was something you could ethically participate in. He leaned forward. So, can you? Lena thought about Robert Garrett and his 200 workers, about the mother fighting for child support, about the small business owner being intimidated by corporate thugs. The people you helped today deserved help, and you were the only one willing to give it to them. That's not an answer to my question. Yes, Lena said firmly, I can ethically participate. Because the alternative is those people suffering while everyone pretends the system works. Victor's expression shifted into something that looked like satisfaction and perhaps respect. Good. Because what I showed you today was the introduction. The real work is considerably more complex. How complex? He was quiet for a moment, and Lena could see him weighing how much to reveal. You asked me before if I was involved in anything that would put you in danger. I said no, and I meant it, but I need to be more specific about what I actually do. Lena's mouth went dry, but she forced herself to maintain steady eye contact. I'm listening. I run what you might call an alternative justice system. When the legal system fails people, when courts are too slow, too expensive, too corrupt, or too blind to see injustice, they come to me. I investigate their situations, determine if they're telling the truth, and if they are, I fix the problem. Victor's voice was measured, careful. Sometimes that means legal pressure. Sometimes it means financial leverage. Sometimes it means reminding powerful people that they're vulnerable too. You're describing vigilante justice, Lena said quietly. I'm describing justice, period. The vigilante part is a matter of perspective. He held her gaze. I don't hurt innocent people, Lena. I don't traffic in drugs or weapons or exploitation. But I do operate outside legal boundaries when those boundaries protect the guilty and punish the innocent. And the money you make from this? Funds the operation, pays my people well, and yes, makes me wealthy. I won't pretend altruism, but I also won't pretend the system works for everyone. He paused. You grew up in that broken system. You know exactly what I mean. He was right. Lena had seen firsthand how the law protected people with money and connections while crushing everyone else. How her mother's medical debt was somehow legal and enforceable while the hospital that had overcharged by 300% faced no consequences. How landlords could threaten eviction for being 3 days late while keeping security deposits for imaginary damages. What's my role in all this? She asked. You'll manage the intake process for consultations, screen potential clients, assess their situations, determine which cases I should take. Eventually, you'll conduct preliminary investigations yourself. Victor's expression was serious. It requires judgment, discretion, and a strong moral compass. Margaret thinks you have all three. So do I. This is what she meant by special consultations. Yes, they happen Tuesday and Thursday evenings. You'll start observing next week. Lena's mind raced through implications. If what you're doing is illegal, it exists in legal gray zones. I'm very careful about what lines I cross and how I cross them. In 15 years of doing this work, I've never been charged with a crime. Victor's voice was confident. I have lawyers, contingency plans, and enough legitimate business to provide cover. You're not going to end up in prison, Lena. But I could end up involved in things that compromise my ethics. You could, which is why I'm telling you all this now, before you're in too deep. He leaned back. You can still walk away. I'll honor my commitment to your debts, give you a severance package, and we'll part as friends. No hard feelings. The offer was genuine. Lena could hear it in his voice. Victor was giving her an exit ramp because he valued informed consent more than keeping her trapped in a situation she hadn't fully understood, which, perversely, made her want to stay. I need to ask you something, Lena said slowly, and I need you to be completely honest. Always. Have you ever killed anyone? Victor's expression didn't change. No. I've hurt people who deserved it, yes. Broken a few bones, sent a few people to hospitals. But I'm not a killer. That's a line I won't cross. Have people working for you killed anyone? Not on my orders. He held her gaze steadily. I employ people who've done terrible things in their pasts. Former criminals, former soldiers, people who've seen darkness. But I don't order executions. That's not who I am. Lena believed him. She didn't know why. Maybe it was the directness of his answers. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was wishful thinking. But she believed him. If I stay, she said carefully, I need you to promise me something. Name it. No lies. If I ask you a direct question, you give me a direct answer, even if you think I won't like it. Done. Victor extended his hand across the table. Partners in this strange work? Lena looked at his hand, thinking about everything that led her to this moment. The elevator where she'd broken down, the debts that had crushed her, the system that had failed her over and over again. And now this man offering her not just a job, but a purpose, helping people the way she'd once dreamed of doing as a lawyer, just through very different means. She shook his hand. Partners. They ate dinner discussing logistics and boundaries. Victor explained the vetting process for clients, the investigation protocols, the ways they documented cases without creating legal liability. Lena asked sharp questions, and he answered them all without hesitation, seeming to appreciate her directness. "You're not afraid of challenging me," he observed over dessert. "That's rare." "You said you were tired of people telling you what you want to hear," Lena reminded him. "I did, and I meant it." He smiled. "Margaret is excellent at her job, but she's been with me long enough that she often knows what I'm thinking before I say it. You're going to push back, question assumptions, see things I miss. That's valuable. Or annoying. Sometimes both." His eyes held warmth, but never unwelcome. The car dropped Lena at her apartment close to midnight. She climbed the stairs feeling exhausted, but also strangely energized. Her first day had revealed a world far more complex than she'd imagined, working for a man whose moral compass pointed in directions that didn't appear on standard maps. But she'd also seen him help people who desperately needed it, seen him correct injustices that would otherwise go unchallenged, and she'd made a choice to be part of that work, whatever it cost her. Her phone buzzed as she was getting ready for bed. A text from Victor. "You did well today. Sleep well. Tomorrow, we go deeper." Lena smiled at the screen, then typed back, "Ready for it." She meant it. Whatever Victor's world held, whatever shadows existed in those gray areas he operated in, she was ready to navigate them. Because for the first time in her life, she felt like she was doing something that mattered. The week accelerated from there. Each day brought new consultations, new cases, new insights into how Victor's operation functioned. Lena met Marco, Victor's head of security, a former Marine with watchful eyes and a protective instinct toward everyone in Victor's inner circle. She met James, the attorney who kept Victor's legitimate businesses pristine while carefully avoiding knowledge of the less legitimate activities. She met Sophia, who ran investigations with a combination of technological expertise and old-fashioned detective work. They all welcomed Lena with a combination of curiosity and respect. Victor's endorsement carried weight, and his people trusted his judgment about character. By Thursday evening, Lena was ready for her first special consultation. Victor had explained the protocol. Clients came to a private office he maintained in a different building, arriving at staggered times to avoid creating patterns. Margaret handled the scheduling through encrypted channels. Everything was designed for discretion. The client was a woman named Patricia Chen, no relation to Margaret. She was in her 40s, well-dressed, but carrying herself with the tension of someone holding together by sheer will. Lena recognized that posture. She'd worn it herself not long ago. Victor's consultation office was smaller than his main workspace, more intimate. A desk, a few comfortable chairs, soft lighting that put people at ease. He gestured for Patricia to sit, then settled across from her with complete attention. "Tell me everything," he said simply. Patricia's story spilled out in a rush. Her ex-husband was a federal judge who'd used his connections to gain custody of their daughter through a corrupt family court proceeding. He was now blocking all visitation, claiming Patricia was unstable despite zero evidence. She'd spent 2 years fighting through proper channels, burning through her savings on lawyers who couldn't overcome judicial bias. "He's doing this to punish me for leaving him," Patricia said, her voice breaking. "My daughter is 12 years old, and I haven't seen her in 8 months. He tells her I abandoned her. She's starting to believe it." Lena felt her chest tighten with familiar rage at systemic injustice. This was exactly the kind of situation where power and position crushed innocent people. Victor listened without interrupting, taking occasional notes. When Patricia finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "Federal judge?" he said finally. "That's complicated. They're usually untouchable." "I know." Patricia's voice was defeated. "That's why I came to you. I've heard you help people when no one else will." "I do, but I need to be clear about what that means." Victor leaned forward. "If I take this case, I'll investigate thoroughly. If everything you've told me is accurate, I'll find leverage against your ex-husband and use it to force him into allowing shared custody. It won't be pleasant, and it may involve revealing things about his life he'd prefer stayed hidden. I don't care what it takes, Patricia said fiercely. I just want my daughter back. My fee for a case like this is $50,000, half up front, half when it's resolved. Patricia didn't even blink. I'll pay it. After she left, Victor turned to Lena. First impression? She's telling the truth, Lena said immediately. Everything in her body language. Her emotional responses, it's all consistent with a mother being separated from her child through corrupt proceedings. I agree, which means we take the case. He made a note on his tablet. Sophia will start the investigation tomorrow. We'll need everything on Judge Chen, financials, communications, associations, vulnerabilities. How long does something like this usually take? Depends on what we find. Could be 2 weeks, could be 2 months. Victor's expression was determined. But we will find something. Everyone has secrets, even federal judges. Lena watched him work over the following weeks, and what she saw was a kind of precision she'd never witnessed before. Victor approached each case like a chess master, seeing moves and countermoves other people missed. He understood human nature with an almost uncomfortable accuracy, knowing exactly what pressure to apply and when. The Robert Garrett case resolved in 5 days. Counselor Morrison suddenly decided to expedite the permit approval after an investigative journalist started asking pointed questions about campaign finance irregularities. Garrett's construction project moved forward, 200 workers kept their jobs, and Victor collected his 10% consulting fee. The child support case took longer, but within 3 weeks the ex-husband mysteriously decided to start making full payments. Lena never learned exactly what leverage Victor had used, but the woman had cried with relief when she called to say thank you. Patricia Chen's case proved more difficult. Judge Chen was careful, his corruption subtle and well hidden. But Sophia was relentless, and eventually she found what they needed, evidence that the judge had been taking kickbacks from private prison companies in exchange for harsh sentencing. Not enough for a criminal case, but more than enough to destroy his reputation and career if it became public. Victor arranged a private meeting with the judge. Lena didn't attend, but she saw the man's face when he left, pale and shaken, the arrogance of untouchable power replaced with fear of exposure. 2 days later, Judge Chen agreed to shared custody. Patricia got her daughter back. Watching it all unfold, Lena felt her understanding shift. Victor Hale operated in shadows, yes. He bent rules and exploited vulnerabilities and profited from other people's desperation. But he also corrected injustices that would otherwise destroy innocent lives. He gave people like Patricia and Robert and countless others a fighting chance against systems designed to crush them. Was that heroic or mercenary? Justice or extortion? The answer, Lena was beginning to understand, was both. Always both. And she was part of it now, for better or worse. She'd stepped into Victor's world with open eyes, and there was no going back to being invisible. She was seen now. By Victor, by his team, by the clients who trusted them with their most desperate problems. And despite all the moral complexity, despite the gray areas and questionable methods, Lena had never felt more alive. 3 months into her new life, Lena had settled into a rhythm she never could have imagined. She woke each morning in her safe apartment, dressed in clothes that made her feel competent and powerful, and went to work solving problems that mattered. The crushing weight of debt and desperation had been replaced by purpose, and something that felt dangerously close to belonging. Victor's world had become her world. She knew the clients by name now, understood the intricate web of connections that made his operation function, could anticipate his needs before he voiced them. Margaret had been right. Lena had surprised herself with how naturally she'd adapted to this strange ecosystem of alternative justice. But she was about to learn that every world had its price, and Victor's was no exception. The warning came on a Tuesday morning in late autumn. Lena arrived at the office to find Marco waiting by the elevator, his usual calm demeanor replaced with visible tension. "Victor wants to see you immediately," he said without preamble. "Conference room, not his office." Lena's stomach tightened. In 3 months, she'd learned to read the subtle signals of Victor's organization. The conference room meant serious business, the kind that required privacy and careful handling. Victor was standing by the windows when she entered, his phone pressed to his ear. His expression was harder than she'd ever seen it, his voice clipped and cold. I don't care what Constantine thinks he's owed. The answer is no, because I don't work with people who threaten my associates, that's why. Tell him if he makes another move toward my people, he'll regret it. He hung up and turned to Lena, his face softening slightly. Sit down. We have a situation. Lena sat, her heart racing. What's happening? There's a man named Konstantin Volkov, Russian, operates out of Brooklyn, runs everything from protection rackets to money laundering. Victor's voice was measured, but she could hear the anger beneath it. We had a mutual understanding. I don't interfere with his business. He doesn't interfere with mine. That understanding just ended. Why? Because I took a case he thinks belongs to him. Victor pulled up a photo on his tablet and slid it across the table. A young woman, maybe 25, with dark hair and frightened eyes, stared out from the screen. Her name is Irina Petrov. She came to me 6 weeks ago. Her father borrowed money from Volkov's organization to pay for her mother's cancer treatment. He couldn't repay it, so Volkov took Irina as collateral. Lena's blood ran cold. Took her how? Forced her to work in one of his nightclubs, not as a dancer, as property. She managed to escape and came to me for help. Victor's jaw tightened. I've been working on getting her father's debt cleared and ensuring Volkov can't touch her again. He found out, and he's not happy about it. What does he want? He wants me to return Irina and pay compensation for interfering in his business. $50,000 and the girl back, or he'll consider it a declaration of war. Lena stared at him. You're not seriously considering giving her back? Of course not. Victor's voice was sharp. But refusing means things are going to get complicated, possibly dangerous. How dangerous? Victor was quiet for a moment, and Lena saw him weighing his words carefully. Volkov is not like the small-time operators we usually deal with. He has resources, connections, and a reputation for violence. If this escalates, people could get hurt. Including me? Possibly. His eyes met hers directly. Which is why I'm giving you a choice. You can step back from this situation entirely. Take a paid leave, stay somewhere safe until it's resolved. Or you can stay involved, knowing the risks. Lena thought about Irina's frightened eyes in that photo. About a young woman being used as collateral, as property, by men who saw human beings as tradable assets. The moral calculus was simple, even if the consequences weren't. Where is she now? Lena asked. Safe house in New Jersey? Marco's people are guarding her? Victor studied her face. You're not considering stepping back, are you? Would you? If you were me? A slight smile touched his lips. No, but I'm a stubborn fool who's made a career out of picking fights with dangerous people. Then I guess we have that in common. Lena leaned forward. What's the plan? Victor's smile widened into something that looked almost proud. The plan is to make it very clear to Konstantin Volkov that threatening my people and demanding I hand over a victim of human trafficking is a spectacularly bad idea. How do we do that? By hitting him where it hurts most, his money and his reputation. Victor pulled up several documents on the tablet. Sophia's been investigating his operations. We found 3 of his money laundering fronts, evidence of immigration fraud, and connections to a human trafficking ring that the FBI would be very interested in. You're going to turn him in to the feds? Not exactly. I'm going to make it very clear that I could, and that the only thing stopping me is his good behavior going forward. Victor's expression was cold and calculating. Mutually assured destruction. He backs off Irina and respects our boundaries, or everything we've found goes to federal prosecutors. It was elegant and ruthless, the kind of solution Lena had come to expect from Victor, but something in his tone suggested there was more to the story. What aren't you telling me? She asked. Victor sighed and sat down across from her. Volkov isn't going to accept this quietly. Men like him respond to threats with violence first and negotiations second. Before I can present this evidence as leverage, he's going to try to intimidate me into compliance. Which means the next few days are going to be tense. He'll make moves designed to scare us, to show he's serious. Possibly surveillance, possibly direct confrontation with my people, possibly worse. Victor held her gaze. This is what I meant about danger, Lena. This isn't white-collar crime or corrupt politicians. This is organized crime, and it plays by different rules. Lena's mouth was dry, but she kept her voice steady. What do you need me to do? First, I need you to move out of your apartment temporarily. Marco will set you up somewhere secure. Victor's tone left no room for argument. Second, I need you to help coordinate our response. You're good at seeing patterns, at anticipating moves. I need that skill right now. You really think he'll come after me? I think he'll come after anyone he thinks I care about. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. And you're my assistant, which makes you a visible target. The idea that Victor cared about her beyond professional utility sent a small thrill through Lena's chest that she immediately suppressed. This wasn't the time for complicated feelings. When do I need to move? She asked. Tonight. Pack what you need for a week. Marco will pick you up at 7. The rest of the day passed in a blur of preparation. Victor made calls to his entire network, putting people on alert. Margaret worked with quiet efficiency, canceling appointments and rescheduling meetings. Sophia compiled evidence against Volkov's organization with the focused intensity of someone preparing for war. And Lena, despite the fear threading through her veins, felt strangely calm. This was what she'd signed up for, even if she hadn't fully understood it at the time. Victor helped people the system failed, and sometimes that meant confronting the predators who exploited those failures. Marco picked her up at 7 sharp, driving her to a luxury apartment building in a neighborhood she'd only seen in magazines. The safe house turned out to be a fully furnished penthouse with round-the-clock security. Victor owns the building, Marco explained as he swept the apartment for listening devices, a precaution that made Lena's heart race. You'll be safe here. 2 guards on the lobby at all times, cameras on every floor, panic button by your bed. Has Victor had to do this before? Put people in safe houses? Marco's expression was carefully neutral. A few times over the years, usually it's clients who need protection. This is the first time he's moved one of us. Why is this different? Because Volkov is different. Most of the people Victor deals with are opportunists, small-time operators who back down when confronted with evidence. Volkov is a true criminal, the kind who sees violence as a legitimate business tool. Marco checked the locks on the windows. Victor's handled men like this before, but it's always risky. After Marco left, Lena stood in the unfamiliar apartment feeling unmoored. The luxury around her was jarring. Marble countertops, floor-to-ceiling windows, art that was probably worth more than her old annual salary. But all she could think about was Irina Petrov, hiding in a different safe house, terrified that the monsters who'd enslaved her would drag her back into darkness. Her phone buzzed. A text from Victor. Settling in okay? Lena typed back, This place is nicer than anywhere I've ever lived. Good. You deserve nice things. Try to get some rest. Tomorrow might be intense. She stared at the message, then added, Are you somewhere safe too? The response came after a pause. I'm always safe. It's what I'm good at. Lena smiled despite herself. Even in the middle of a crisis, Victor's confidence was unshakable. She wondered if it was real or performance, then decided it was probably both. She tried to sleep but spent most of the night staring at the ceiling, listening to unfamiliar sounds and jumping at shadows. When dawn finally came, she was exhausted but wired with nervous energy. Her phone rang at 6 a.m., Victor's name on the screen. I need you at the office by 7, he said without greeting. Volkov sent a message. Lena's stomach dropped. What kind of message? The kind that requires immediate response. Marco's on his way to get you. 20 minutes later, she was in the back of Marco's car, racing through empty early morning streets toward the office. Marco's jaw was tight, his eyes constantly checking mirrors for tails. What happened? Lena asked. Volkov's people vandalized one of Victor's legitimate businesses last night. Broke windows, spray-painted threats, roughed up the night security guard. Marco's voice was hard. It's a statement. He's showing he can reach Victor's operations whenever he wants. Is the guard okay? Broken nose, some bruises? He'll recover. Marco pulled into the underground parking garage beneath Victor's building, entering through a security checkpoint Lena had never seen before. But the message is clear. Volkov wants Victor scared. They rode the elevator to the 62nd floor in tense silence. The office was already full of people despite the early hour. Sophia sat at a bank of computers, tracking something across multiple screens. James, the attorney, was on his phone speaking in rapid, clipped tones. Margaret moved between them with calm efficiency, coordinating responses. Victor stood in the center of it all, radiating controlled fury. When he saw Lena, something in his expression softened fractionally. "Thank you for coming quickly," he said. "Of course. What do you need?" "I need you to watch something and tell me what you see." He gestured to Sophia's screens. "Show her the footage." Sophia pulled up security camera footage from the vandalized business, a high-end restaurant Victor owned in the financial district. Lena watched as 3 men in dark clothing systematically destroyed the front windows, spray-painted crude threats in Russian, then beat a security guard who tried to stop them. "They wanted to be seen," Lena said, watching the men's deliberate movements. "They're facing the cameras directly, making sure we get clear shots of what they're doing." "Exactly." Victor's voice was tight. "This isn't about actual damage. It's about demonstrating power and willingness to use violence." "So what's our response?" "We accelerate the timeline. I'm meeting with Volkov this afternoon, presenting our evidence, and making it clear that his choices are to back off or face federal prosecution." Victor's eyes were hard. "But first we need to make sure Irina is secure. I'm moving her to a different location, somewhere even my own people don't know about. If Volkov gets to her, we lose all leverage." "Do you think he knows where she is now?" "I think we have to assume he has sources everywhere, which is why the new location will be known only to me and Marco." Victor pulled Lena aside, lowering his voice. "I need you to do something difficult. I need you to contact Irina's father and convince him to make a statement about Volkov's loan practices. If we have his testimony on record, it strengthens our case and makes it harder for Volkov to claim this is just business." "Where is he?" "Brighton Beach. Sophia has the address." Victor's expression was serious. "Marco will go with you. The neighborhood is Volkov's territory, so you'll need to be careful. In and out quickly, no unnecessary exposure." Lena's heart hammered, but she nodded. "I can do that." "I know you can." Victor's hand briefly touched her shoulder, a fleeting contact that somehow conveyed both confidence and concern. "But Lena, if anything feels wrong, if you sense any danger at all, you leave immediately. The statement isn't worth risking your safety." 2 hours later, Lena sat in the back of Marco's car as they drove through Brooklyn toward Brighton Beach. The neighborhood was a mix of old-world charm and urban decay, with Cyrillic signs on storefronts and clusters of men smoking on street corners who watched their car pass with calculating eyes. "Volkov's people are everywhere here," Marco said quietly. "They'll clock us as outsiders immediately. We need to move fast." Irina's father, Dmitry Petrov, lived in a rent-controlled apartment building that had seen better decades. Marco swept the stairwell before allowing Lena to climb to the 3rd floor, his hand resting near the gun she now knew he always carried. Dmitry answered the door looking like a man who'd aged 20 years in the past few months. His eyes were hollow, his face gaunt, his hands trembling as he recognized Marco. "Please," he said in accented English, "please tell me my Irina is safe." "She's safe," Lena assured him, stepping forward. "Mr. Petrov, my name is Lena Carter. I work with the man who's protecting your daughter. We need your help." They sat in his cramped living room while Lena explained what they needed, a formal statement detailing how Volkov's organization had entrapped him with predatory lending, then taken his daughter as collateral when he couldn't pay. Dmitry listened with tears streaming down his weathered face. "I was desperate," he whispered. "My wife was dying. The hospitals wanted money we didn't have. Volkov's people said they could help, that the interest was reasonable. But it wasn't. It was designed to be impossible to repay. And when you couldn't pay, they said I could work it off, manual labor at their warehouses, their construction sites. But I'm 63 years old with a bad back. I couldn't do the work they demanded." His voice broke. "So they took my Irina instead. Said she'd work at their club until the debt was settled. But the debt never gets settled. They keep adding fees, penalties. It's slavery." Lena felt rage burning in her chest. This was why Victor's work mattered. This was the human cost of systems that failed to protect vulnerable people from predators. If you give us a statement, we can use it as leverage to force Volkov to forgive your debt and leave your daughter alone permanently, she said gently. But I need you to understand, making this statement puts you at risk. Volkov doesn't like people who talk. Dmitri's eyes met hers, and she saw steel beneath the fear. My daughter is 25 years old. She should be starting her life, not hiding from monsters because of my mistakes. If my statement helps keep her safe, I'll make it. Marco recorded Dmitri's testimony on an encrypted device while Lena asked careful questions, drawing out details that would be valuable as evidence. The old man spoke for nearly an hour, describing the predatory loan terms, the impossible interest rates, the threats and intimidation when he couldn't pay, and finally the nightmare of watching his daughter be taken as human collateral. When they finished, Dmitri looked simultaneously relieved and terrified. "Will this really end it?" he asked. "Will my Irina truly be free?" "We're going to do everything in our power to make that happen," Lena promised. She meant it with every fiber of her being. They were leaving the building when Marco's phone buzzed. He checked it, and his expression went dark. "We need to leave. Now." "What's wrong?" "Sophia just flagged 3 of Volkov's known associates entering this neighborhood. They might not be coming for us, but we're not taking chances." He guided her quickly toward the car, his eyes scanning every shadow and corner. They were half a block away when a black SUV pulled across the intersection ahead of them, blocking their path. Another appeared behind them. Marco cursed under his breath and pulled Lena into a narrow alley between buildings. "Stay close to me," he said, his voice utterly calm despite the danger. "Do exactly what I say, when I say it." They moved quickly through the alley, Marco navigating with the practiced ease of someone who'd done this before. Lena's heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst from her chest, but she forced herself to stay focused and move quietly. Behind them, she heard car doors slamming, heavy footsteps, voices shouting in Russian. Marco pulled out his phone and typed rapidly while still moving. Then he grabbed Lena's hand and pulled her into a recessed doorway, pressing them both into the shadows. "Don't move," he breathed. "Don't make a sound." 3 men passed within feet of their hiding place, speaking in rapid Russian. They were armed. Lena could see the bulges of weapons beneath their jackets. Her entire body tensed with fear, but Marco's steady presence beside her kept her from panicking. The men continued down the alley and turned the corner. Marco waited 30 seconds, then guided Lena in the opposite direction, moving through a maze of back streets and alleyways with confident precision. 10 minutes later, they emerged on a busy commercial street where Marco had arranged for a second car to meet them. They slid into the back seat, and the driver, a woman Lena had never seen before, pulled smoothly into traffic. "You okay?" Marco asked, his eyes still scanning for threats. Lena realized she was shaking. "I think so. That was close." "Too close. Volkov's people were definitely looking for us." He pulled out his phone and called Victor. "We're clear, but they made us. We've got the statement, heading back now." Lena could hear Victor's voice through the phone, tense and sharp. Marco listened, then hung up and turned to her. "Victor's moving the meeting with Volkov up to this evening. He wants this resolved before anyone else gets hurt." Marco's expression was grim. "He also wants you back at the safe house until it's over." "No." The word came out before Lena could think about it. "If he's meeting with Volkov tonight, I should be there." "Lena, that's not... I helped build this case. I got Dmitri's statement. I deserve to see it through." She held Marco's gaze. "And Victor might need backup. Someone who can read the room, see things he might miss." Marco studied her for a long moment, then sighed. "I'll ask him. But if he says no, you don't argue. Understood?" "Understood." Victor said yes, though Lena could hear the reluctance in his voice when Marco relayed her request. The meeting was set for 8 p.m. at a restaurant Volkov owned in Brighton Beach, neutral territory where both men could bring limited security. The hours before the meeting crawled by with excruciating slowness. Lena returned to the safe house to change into professional clothes that wouldn't make her stand out, then met Victor and Marco at a staging location 2 blocks from the restaurant. Victor looked at her carefully when she arrived. "You're sure about this?" "I'm sure. If things go wrong, Marco gets you out first. That's non-negotiable." "Okay." He studied her face a moment longer, then nodded. "Stay close. Stay quiet and trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, signal Marco. They walked to the restaurant together, Victor moving with his characteristic confidence, Marco alert and watchful, Lena trying to project a calm she didn't entirely feel. The restaurant was closed to regular customers, but lights blazed inside. Through the windows, Lena could see men in dark suits stationed at strategic points, Volkov's people, waiting. Victor pushed open the door and walked inside like he owned the place. Lena followed, her heart in her throat, stepping into a confrontation that would determine whether their gamble paid off or if the violence they'd been trying to avoid would become inevitable. Konstantin Volkov sat at a table in the center of the room, flanked by two massive men who looked like they'd crushed skulls for breakfast. He was older than Lena expected, maybe 60, with silver hair and cold blue eyes that assessed them like a predator sizing up prey. "Victor Hale," he said in heavily accented English. "You bring assistants to business meetings now?" "I bring the people I trust," Victor replied calmly, settling into the chair across from Volkov. Lena and Marco remained standing slightly behind him. "Shall we discuss why we're here?" Volkov smiled, showing too many teeth. "Yes. Let us discuss how you will return what you stole from me and pay compensation for your interference." Victor pulled out a tablet and set it on the table between them. "Or we can discuss how you're going to forgive Dmitry Petrov's debt, leave his daughter alone permanently, and never threaten my people again." Volkov's smile didn't waver, but his eyes went dead. "And why would I do that?" "Because if you don't, this information goes to the FBI." Victor tapped the tablet, pulling up files and documents. 3 money laundering operations, evidence of immigration fraud, connections to a human trafficking ring, your entire operation exposed and dismantled. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Volkov's men shifted, hands moving toward weapons. Marco's hand went to his own gun, and Lena felt the moment balance on a knife's edge. Then Volkov laughed, a cold, mirthless sound. "You threaten me with police? In my own restaurant?" "I'm offering you a choice," Victor said, his voice steady. "Back off, or face consequences that will destroy everything you've built. Mutually assured destruction keeps us both safe. Continued aggression guarantees we both lose." Volkov leaned back, his eyes never leaving Victor's face. Lena watched the two men assess each other, predators calculating risk and reward, power and vulnerability. Finally, Volkov spoke. "You have courage, I give you that. Foolish courage, but courage." He gestured at the tablet. "This evidence, how do I know it's real?" "Because I don't bluff," Victor said simply. "You can verify it yourself if you'd like. Take your time. But every day you delay is another day my patience wears thin." The silence stretched out, thick with tension. Then Volkov's smile returned, though it never reached his eyes. "Perhaps we can reach understanding after all." The negotiation that followed was a masterclass in controlled tension. Victor and Volkov circled each other verbally like prize-fighters, each testing the other's resolve, looking for weaknesses to exploit. Lena watched from her position slightly behind Victor, reading body language and micro-expressions, learning how power actually worked when stripped of pretense. Volkov wanted assurances that the evidence would be destroyed, not just withheld. Victor refused, insisting that mutually assured destruction only worked if the destruction remained mutually assured. They argued over terms, compensation, and what forgiveness of Dmitry's debt actually meant in practical terms. Finally, after nearly 2 hours of negotiation, they reached an agreement. Volkov would forgive the Petrov debt entirely, would not pursue Irina or her father, and would respect the boundaries of Victor's operation going forward. In exchange, Victor would keep the evidence secure but unused, and would consider future requests from Volkov for consultation services at standard rates. It was a truce, not a friendship. But it was enough. "One more thing," Victor said as they prepared to leave. "The security guard your people hurt. His medical bills and lost wages will be compensated. $50,000. Delivered to my office by Friday." Volkov's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly. "Done." Outside the restaurant, Lena finally allowed herself to breathe. The cool night air felt like freedom after the suffocating tension inside. "You did well in there," Victor said as Marco brought the car around. Staying calm under that kind of pressure isn't easy. I was terrified, Lena admitted. So was I. Victor's honesty surprised her. Fear is useful. It keeps you sharp, keeps you from making stupid mistakes. The trick is not letting it control you. They drove in silence for several minutes before Lena asked the question that had been building all evening. How many times have you done that? Sat across from dangerous men and negotiated for people's lives? More than I can count. Victor stared out the window at the passing city lights. It never gets easier, but it's necessary work. Is it, though? The question emerged before Lena could stop it. I mean, we could have just given Volkov's information to the FBI from the start. Let them handle it through proper channels. Victor turned to look at her, his expression thoughtful rather than defensive. We could have, and Volkov would have been arrested, yes, but the federal case would take years to build, and in the meantime, Irina and her father would have remained vulnerable. Volkov's organization would have continued operating, hurting other people. This way, we solved the immediate problem and created deterrence against future harm. But we also let a criminal walk free. We ensured a victim stayed safe, and a father got his daughter back. Victor's voice was quiet, but firm. I'm not saying it's perfect, Lena. I'm saying it's effective. The system you're talking about, the proper channels, fails people like Irina every single day. What we did tonight worked. Lena knew he was right, but the moral complexity still sat heavy in her chest. Where does it end, though? How many compromises do we make before we become the problem we're trying to solve? Victor was quiet for a long moment. That's the question I ask myself every day. And I don't have a good answer, except to say that I try to maintain lines I won't cross. No killing, no exploitation of the vulnerable, no corruption of the innocent. As long as I stay on the right side of those lines, I believe the work is worth doing. And if you cross them, then I stop. He said it with such finality that Lena believed him. I've always known there would come a day when I'd have to choose between continuing this work and maintaining my integrity. When that day comes, I'll choose integrity. Marco dropped them at the office building where Victor's car was waiting. It was nearly midnight, and the city was quieter now, the usual chaos muted by late hours. Go home and rest, Victor told Lena. You can move back to your apartment tomorrow. The threat's over. What about you? I have some things to finish up here. Paperwork, calls to make. He smiled slightly. The glamorous side of vigilante justice. Lena hesitated, then asked the question that had been hovering unspoken between them for months. Victor, why do you really do this? And don't tell me it's just about helping people or maintaining balance. There's something else driving you. He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw him weighing whether to answer honestly. Finally, he gestured toward the building. Come up for a minute. There's something I want to show you. They rode the elevator to the 62nd floor in comfortable silence. The office was empty, lit only by city lights streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Victor led her not to his office, but to a small room she'd never entered before. A private space with comfortable chairs, bookshelves, and walls covered in photographs. This is everyone I've helped over the past 15 years, Victor said, gesturing to the photos. Hundreds of faces looked back. Men, women, children, families. Each photo had a small caption beneath it. That's Patricia Chen and her daughter, reunited after the custody case. That's Robert Garrett cutting the ribbon at his construction project that employed 200 people. That's Maria Santos, who we helped escape from her abusive ex-husband who was using his police connections to stalk her. Lena moved slowly along the wall, reading caption after caption. Each represented a life changed, a problem solved, a person who'd been drowning until Victor threw them a lifeline. This is why I do it, Victor said quietly. Every one of these people deserve better than what the system gave them. Every one of them was failed by institutions that are supposed to protect the vulnerable. I can't fix the entire system, but I can fix individual problems, one case at a time. It's not just about the work, Lena said, still studying the photos. It's personal for you. Yes. Victor moved to stand beside her, looking at a particular photograph, a teenage boy with Victor's dark eyes and a bright smile. That's my younger brother, Daniel. He died 20 years ago. Overdose. Lena's breath caught. I'm so sorry. He got involved with a dealer who deliberately got kids hooked, then used their addiction to control them. Daniel tried to get clean, tried to get help through official channels. rehab programs with year-long waiting lists, counselors who were overworked and underfunded, police who treated him like a criminal rather than a victim. Victor's voice was tight with old pain. By the time anyone took his situation seriously, it was too late. He was 19 years old. And the dealer? Eventually went to prison for different charges, served 8 years, got out on good behavior. Victor's jaw tightened. The system worked exactly as it was designed to work, slowly, inadequately, and too late to save my brother. Understanding crashed over Lena like a wave. So you built your own system. I built an alternative, one that responds immediately to people in crisis, one that doesn't require people to navigate bureaucracy while they're drowning, one that actually solves problems instead of just processing them. He turned to face her. Is it perfect? No. Is it sometimes morally complicated? Absolutely. But it works, Lena. It saves people who would otherwise be lost. Lena looked at the wall of photographs again, seeing them differently now. These weren't just cases Victor had taken for money or power. They were his brother's face reflected back at him hundreds of times over. Every person he saved was a chance to rewrite the ending of a story that had broken him 20 years ago. "You're trying to save him," she said softly, "over and over again." Maybe. Victor's voice was raw in a way she'd never heard before. Or maybe I'm trying to build the world that should have existed when he needed help. A world where people like Daniel, like Irina, like you when you were drowning in debt, where all of you have someone who sees you and actually helps instead of just sympathizing and moving on. The vulnerability in his admission made Lena's chest ache. This man who projected such confidence and control was driven by the same thing that drove her, the desperate need to matter, to make a difference, to ensure that suffering didn't go unanswered. "Thank you for showing me this," she said, "for trusting me with it. You've earned that trust." Victor's eyes met hers, and something shifted in the air between them. "You've been remarkable these past months, Lena. Smarter than I expected, braver than you probably realize, and more adaptable than anyone I've worked with. I had a good teacher. You had good instincts. I just gave you room to use them." He moved closer, and Lena's heart rate picked up. "But tonight made me realize something. This work is dangerous, and it's only going to get more so. The higher we climb, the more powerful our enemies become. I can accept that risk for myself, but asking you to accept it feels different." "Why?" "Because somewhere along the way you stopped being just my assistant." His voice was quiet but steady. "You became someone I care about, someone whose safety matters to me beyond professional obligation." Lena's breath caught. She'd felt the tension building between them for weeks now, the lingering glances, the casual touches that lasted a moment too long, the way Victor's attention sharpened whenever she entered a room. But hearing him acknowledge it made it real in a way that both thrilled and terrified her. "Victor, I'm not asking you for anything," he interrupted gently. "I'm just being honest. You deserve honesty, especially about this. Because if you stay in this work, if you continue being part of what I do, you need to know that I'm not always going to be able to separate professional judgment from personal feelings." "Would that be so terrible?" The words escaped before Lena could think better of them. Victor's expression softened into something that looked almost like longing. "It would be complicated. You work for me. There's a power dynamic that makes any personal relationship ethically questionable, and my world is dangerous. Anyone close to me becomes a target." "I was a target tonight anyway," Lena pointed out. "And I handled it." "You did. But that was a crisis situation. I'm talking about choosing to be with someone whose life exists in constant moral gray areas. Someone who makes compromises that might horrify you. Someone who—" He stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. "Someone who's done things I'm not proud of in pursuit of what I believed was justice." Lena moved closer, closing the distance between them until she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. 3 months ago, I was invisible. I was drowning in debt and hopelessness, convinced that my life would never be more than survival. You saw me. You gave me a chance when you had no reason to. You showed me that I could be more than what circumstances had made me. Lena, I'm not finished." She held his gaze. "Yes, Your methods are questionable. Yes, you operate in moral gray areas. Yes, this world is dangerous and complicated. But you also help people who desperately need it. You correct injustices that would otherwise destroy lives, and you do it while maintaining principles that a lot of legitimate business people don't have. That's a generous interpretation. It's an honest one. She reached up and touched his face, feeling the slight stubble on his jaw, the warmth of his skin. You asked me once if I was brave enough to say yes to this job. I'm asking you now. Are you brave enough to let this be more than just professional? For a moment, Victor stood frozen, clearly warring with himself. Then he leaned down and kissed her, and Lena felt the world narrow to just this moment, this connection, this choice they were both making despite every rational argument against it. The kiss was gentle at first, almost questioning. Then Victor's hand came up to cradle the back of her head, and the kiss deepened into something more urgent, more real. Lena's fingers tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, and for those few heartbeats nothing else existed. Not the moral complexity, not the danger, not the complications. Just two people who'd found each other in darkness and decided to reach for light. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Victor rested his forehead against hers. "This changes everything," he said quietly. "I know. We'll have to be careful, discreet. I won't have people thinking you earned your position through anything other than merit." "I understand. And if it becomes too much, if my work, or my world, or the compromises I make become something you can't accept, you have to tell me. You have to be honest." Lena pulled back slightly to look at him directly. "I will be. But Victor, you need to understand something. I'm not some naive girl who needs protecting from difficult truths. I've seen what you do. I've been part of it, and I've chosen to stay because I believe in it, in you." Something in his expression cracked open, revealing a vulnerability that took her breath away. "I don't deserve you." "Maybe not. But you've got me anyway." She smiled. "So what do we do now?" Victor was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he said, "Now we finish what we started. We make sure Irina Petrov and her father are truly safe. We continue helping people who need it. We navigate this complicated world together, with honesty and trust as our foundation." "And us? What are we?" "Partners." He said it with certainty. "In every sense of the word. You're not just my assistant anymore, Lena. You're my equal in this work. And if you're willing, you're more than that too." "I'm willing," Lena said softly. "More than willing." They spent the next few hours talking, really talking, in a way they hadn't before. Victor told her about his brother, about the years after Daniel's death when he'd been consumed by rage at a system that had failed someone he loved, about the man who'd given him a chance and taught him how to build power outside conventional structures, about the first few cases he'd taken and how terrified he'd been that he was making things worse instead of better. Lena told him about her mother, about watching cancer destroy not just a body but an entire family's future, about the shame of poverty, the exhaustion of working 3 jobs, the slow erosion of hope that had led her to that breakdown in the elevator, about how meeting him had felt like being given permission to want more than just survival. By the time dawn started painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, they'd laid bare the foundations of who they were and what they could become together. "I should let you get some rest," Victor said reluctantly, as the city began to wake below them. "You should rest too. When was the last time you slept?" "I'll sleep when things are settled." He pulled her close, and Lena allowed herself to lean into his warmth. "But soon, I promise." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Victor kept his word about Irina Petrov, ensuring not just that Volkov honored their agreement, but that Irina and her father were set up with new identities and relocated to a different state where Volkov's reach couldn't find them. He paid for Dmitri's medical care and helped Irina enroll in community college, giving her a chance to build the life she'd been denied. Watching it happen, Lena understood more clearly than ever why this work mattered. The system would have processed Irina as a statistic if it noticed her at all. Victor treated her as a human being who deserved safety and opportunity. But she also noticed something changing in Victor. He was more careful now, more thoughtful about which cases to take and what methods to employ. When a potential client came in asking for help with something that would require bribing a judge, Victor refused, suggesting legal alternatives instead. When another situation arose that would have required threatening violence, he found a different solution. "You're pulling back," Lena observed one evening as they reviewed cases in his office. "I'm being more selective," Victor corrected. "There's a difference." "What changed?" He looked at her with those dark, intelligent eyes. "You did. Having you in my life makes me think more carefully about the example I'm setting, the precedents I'm creating. I want to be worthy of your faith in me." "Victor, you don't have to change who you are." "I'm not changing who I am. I'm becoming a better version of myself." He reached across the desk and took her hand. "You make me want to be better, Lena. Not because you've asked me to, but because you deserve someone who is." Their relationship developed slowly, carefully, built on the foundation of trust they'd established through work. They were discreet at the office, maintaining professional boundaries, but in private they explored the connection that had been building since that night in the elevator 6 months ago. Lena learned that Victor was surprisingly gentle despite his commanding presence, that he loved classic literature and cooked elaborate meals when he needed to think, that he had nightmares about his brother sometimes and woke up reaching for reassurance that the people he cared about were safe. Victor learned that Lena was fiercer than her quiet demeanor suggested, that she had a dark sense of humor that emerged when she felt safe, that she still sometimes woke up panicking about debt that no longer existed, phantom weight from a past that had marked her more deeply than she'd realized. They healed each other in small ways, two people who'd been shaped by loss and injustice, finding unexpected grace in partnership. 8 months after that initial meeting in the elevator, Victor called Lena into his office with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I've been thinking about something," he said without preamble, "about the future of this organization and what I want it to become." Lena sat down, intrigued. "Okay." "When I started this work, it was about channeling my rage at Daniel's death into something productive. Helping people was a way to make meaning from tragedy." He leaned back in his chair. "But over the years, it's become something else. It's become my entire identity." Victor Hale, the fixer, the man who operates in shadows and solves problems through questionable means. "That's not all you are," Lena said gently. "No, but it's consumed most of what I am." He stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city. "I'm 43 years old, Lena. I've built something powerful here, but I've also built something isolating. Everyone in my life is either a client, an employee, or a potential threat. Except you." "Where's this going?" Victor turned back to face her. "I want to step away. Not immediately, and not completely. But I want to start transitioning this operation into something more legitimate. Something that can help people without requiring me to live in constant moral gray areas." Lena's heart raced. "What are you proposing?" "A foundation. Properly funded, legally structured, focused on helping people navigate systems that fail them. We'd still take cases that require unconventional solutions, but we'd prioritize legal advocacy, financial assistance, and systemic reform." He moved back to his desk. "I want to build something that could continue after I'm gone, something that honors Daniel's memory by actually fixing the problems that killed him." "That's ambitious. It's necessary." Victor's voice was firm. "I've spent 15 years operating in shadows. I've helped hundreds of people, but I've also made compromises that keep me awake at night. I want to do better. I want to build something you can be proud to be part of without reservation." Lena stood and walked around the desk to stand in front of him. "I'm already proud to be part of this. Proud of what you've built, proud of the people you've helped, proud of the man you are." "Even knowing everything I've done?" "Especially knowing everything you've done, because you've never lost sight of why you do it." She took his hands in hers. "But I also think this is a good evolution, building something more sustainable, more ethical, more lasting. I want to help you do that." "You'd be more than helping. You'd be co-directing it with me." Victor squeezed her hands. "I want us to build this together, equal partners in every sense." "Are you sure? That's a huge responsibility." "I've never been more sure of anything." His eyes held hers with absolute certainty. "You're the smartest, most capable, most ethical person I know. You see things I miss. You challenge me when I need it and support me when I falter. I can't imagine building this future with anyone else. Tears pricked Lena's eyes. When do we start? We already have. Victor pulled her close, and she rested her head against his chest, hearing the steady beat of his heart. We've been building it piece by piece, case by case, choice by choice. Now we just need to formalize it and scale it up. Over the next year, they worked tirelessly to transform Victor's operation. They established the Daniel Hale Foundation for Alternative Justice, named after his brother. They hired attorneys, social workers, and advocates who specialized in helping people navigate broken systems. They created programs for debt relief, legal advocacy, and crisis intervention, all the services Victor had been providing informally, but now structured legitimately. The transition wasn't easy. Some of Victor's old clients didn't understand why he was pulling back from the more aggressive tactics that had made him effective. Some of his team struggled with the shift from working in shadows to operating in public view. There were moments when Lena wondered if they were making a mistake, if the foundation could ever be as effective as Victor's old methods. But then she'd see someone like Irina Petrov, now Irina Morrison, having changed her name and started fresh, graduate from college with honors. Or Robert Garrett expanding his business and hiring another 100 workers. Or Patricia Chen and her daughter rebuilding their relationship after years of forced separation. The foundation might work differently than Victor's old operation, but it worked. And it worked in ways that didn't require moral compromise or operating outside the law. They were proving that effective help didn't have to exist in shadows. 2 years after that night in the elevator, on an evening when autumn was painting the city in shades of gold and amber, Victor and Lena stood on the roof of their building overlooking the skyline. The foundation was thriving, helping hundreds of people every month. They'd just finished a case that had taken 8 months, helping a group of immigrant workers recover wages from an employer who'd been exploiting their documentation status. "Do you ever miss it?" Lena asked, leaning against the railing. "The old way of doing things, the direct action." Victor considered this carefully. Sometimes. There was a certain satisfaction in being able to solve problems immediately, without bureaucracy or constraints. But I don't miss the weight of it, the constant ethical calculations, the fear that I'd eventually cross a line I couldn't come back from. "Do you think we're making enough of a difference? The foundation helps people, but it's slower than what you used to do." "It's slower," Victor agreed, "but it's sustainable, and it's building something larger than individual cases. We're creating precedents, changing policies, showing that alternative justice can exist within legal frameworks." He turned to face her. "What we're doing now is going to outlast us. That matters." Lena nodded, knowing he was right. They were building legacy now, not just solving problems. "There's something I want to ask you," Victor said, his voice carrying a note of nervousness she rarely heard from him. "Okay." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Lena's heart stopped, then started racing double time. 2 years ago, I met a woman who was breaking down in an elevator at 3 in the morning, Victor said, opening the box to reveal a simple but elegant ring. She was invisible to everyone else, but I saw her strength, her intelligence, her potential. She changed my life in ways I never expected. Tears were already streaming down Lena's face. "You reminded me that helping people wasn't just about channeling rage or building power. It was about seeing human beings as worthy of care and fighting for them because they mattered." Victor's voice was thick with emotion. "You made me want to be better. You showed me that I could build something meaningful without sacrificing my integrity. You became my partner in every sense of the word. Victor, Lena Carter, will you marry me? Not because I saved you from debt or because we work together, but because I love you and I can't imagine building this future without you by my side." Lena laughed through her tears, the sound bright and joyful in the cooling evening air. "Yes. Yes, of course, yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, and she pulled him into a kiss that tasted like promise and possibility. They stood on that rooftop as the city lights flickered on below them, two people who'd found each other in darkness and chosen to build something beautiful in the light. "I love you," Lena whispered against his lips. "Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible." "I love you too," Victor murmured back. "And you were never invisible. You just hadn't found your light yet." 5 years later, Lena Carter Hale stood in front of a graduating class at the law school she'd once had to leave. She'd finished her degree part-time while running the foundation, and now she was here as the commencement speaker, sharing her story with students who were about to enter the legal profession. "The system will fail people," she told them, her voice carrying across the packed auditorium. "No matter how hard you work, no matter how much you care, there will be moments when the law can't reach someone who desperately needs help. In those moments, you have a choice. You can accept the limitations of the system and move on, or you can find creative, ethical ways to fill the gaps." She looked out at the sea of faces, seeing hope and idealism and the same determination she'd once felt. "I'm not advocating for vigilante justice or operating outside the law. What I'm advocating for is innovation within legal frameworks, for building alternatives when traditional systems fail, for seeing people as worthy of your time and creativity, not just as cases to be processed." In the audience, Victor sat with Margaret and Marco and Sophia and the rest of their team from the foundation. Patricia Chen was there with her daughter. Robert Garrett had sent flowers. Dozens of people whose lives had been changed by the foundation had come to watch Lena receive recognition for the work she'd built. 5 years ago, I was drowning in debt and hopelessness," Lena continued. "I dropped out of this very law school, convinced my dreams were dead. Then someone saw me when I was invisible. Someone gave me a chance I didn't think I deserved. Someone showed me that one person with resources and determination could change lives." She paused, making eye contact with Victor. He smiled at her, pride evident in his expression. "That experience taught me that we all have the power to see people others miss, to offer chances that change trajectories, to build systems that work when official ones fail. That's what I challenge you to do as you begin your legal careers. See the invisible people. Fight for them. Build something that makes the world more just, one case at a time." The applause that followed was thunderous. After the ceremony, Lena was surrounded by students asking questions, seeking advice, wanting to know more about the foundation and how they could be part of building alternative justice frameworks. "You're inspiring the next generation," Victor said later that evening as they drove home together. They lived in a brownstone now, in a neighborhood that was safe and beautiful and theirs. "These kids are going to change the legal profession." "I hope so." Lena looked at her wedding ring, still marveling sometimes that this was her life. "We can't do it all ourselves. We need more people willing to see the gaps and fill them." "We're doing pretty well, though." Victor's hand found hers. "The foundation helped over 2,000 people last year. We've influenced policy changes in 3 states, and we're profitable enough to sustain operations indefinitely." "Your brother would be proud," Lena said softly. "I think he would." Victor's voice carried the old grief, but gentler now, transformed by meaning and purpose. "We're building the world that should have existed for him. That's the best memorial I can offer." They pulled up to their home, where lights glowed warm in the windows. Inside, they'd created a space filled with books and art and photographs, not just from cases they'd helped with, but from the life they were building together. A life that balanced important work with genuine rest, purpose with peace. "I'm going to check the foundation's crisis line," Lena said as they walked inside. "There were 3 new cases today that need review." "After dinner," Victor said firmly. "We have a rule, remember? Work stays at work after 8 p.m. unless it's a genuine emergency." "When did you become the responsible one?" "When I married someone who made me want to have a life outside of work." He pulled her close, kissing her forehead. "We've got time, love. The cases will still be there in the morning." Lena relaxed into his embrace, feeling the truth of his words. They did have time. Time to help people, time to build something lasting, time to be together without the weight of impossible urgency pressing down on every moment. That night, lying in bed with Victor asleep beside her, Lena thought about the journey that had brought her here. From invisible cleaner drowning in debt to co-director of a foundation that changed lives. From that moment of breaking down in an elevator to this moment of contentment and purpose. She thought about all the people they'd helped along the way. The Arenas and Patricias and Roberts, whose lives had been redirected from despair to possibility. The hundreds of others whose names she knew, whose stories she carried, whose gratitude reminded her why this work mattered. But most of all, she thought about Victor. About the man who'd seen her when she was invisible and offered her not rescue but partnership. Who'd challenged her to be more than she thought possible and supported her every step of the way. Who'd chosen to evolve his own work because she made him want to be better. They'd built something extraordinary together. Not just the foundation, but a relationship grounded in mutual respect, honest communication, and shared purpose. They'd taken the darkness they'd both experienced, her drowning in debt, his grief over his brother, and transformed it into light for others. Lena understood now what Victor had meant that first night when he'd asked if she was brave enough to say yes. It wasn't just about taking the job or accepting his help. It was about being brave enough to believe she deserved more than survival. Brave enough to step into a world that challenged everything she thought she knew. Brave enough to love someone complicated and build something meaningful together. She'd found that bravery, and it had changed everything. Outside, the city hummed with its usual chaos, sirens and traffic and millions of stories unfolding in the darkness. Somewhere out there, someone was probably breaking down in an elevator, feeling invisible and hopeless. Somewhere, people were drowning in circumstances beyond their control. But now there was a foundation ready to help them. A team of people who understood that justice didn't always come through official channels, who knew how to see the invisible and offer them something more than sympathy. Lena smiled in the darkness, feeling Victor's steady breathing beside her. They'd started with one moment of connection in an elevator at 3 a.m. From that single moment, they'd built a life, a mission, and a future that honored everyone who'd ever been invisible. She was seen now, truly seen. And she dedicated her life to ensuring others would be seen too. That was everything. That was enough. That was the extraordinary they'd built from ordinary brokenness. And tomorrow, they'd wake up and do it all over again. Helping people who needed it. Building systems that worked. Loving each other through the complexity and compromise and constant choice to be better. One case at a time. One day at a time. One life transformed at a time. It was the work of a lifetime, and Lena Carter Hale had never been more ready for it. She closed her eyes, feeling peace settle over her like a blanket. The woman who'd cried alone in an elevator was gone, replaced by someone stronger and surer. But she carried that woman's memory with her, using it to fuel compassion for everyone who felt invisible and forgotten. Because she understood now what Victor had known all along. Being seen was the beginning of transformation. And sometimes, all it took was one person willing to look when everyone else turned away. One night in an elevator hadn't rescued her. It had reminded her who she was and who she could become. And that had changed everything.